Hi guys, how is everyone? How are you guys doing? I hope all of you are doing amazing. I think I kind of sound the same in the beginning of every video. I maybe should try working on my introduction. Anyways, a very warm welcome to this session. I hope you guys have been staying home, staying safe, and are doing awesome. All my bachas are like super awesome, very energetic and very motivated. I'm very excited for this session, right? Okay, so I'm Ankana, your master teacher for social sciences at Vedantu, and I hope that you guys have been so good and that you were eagerly waiting for this session. So we should get started without waiting further, right? Okay, so as I said, a very warm welcome to the second session of the rise of nationalism in Europe. Okay, before we get started, let's quickly look at the answer from the previous session. So the answer to the homework question is Austria, Prussia, Russia and Britain. Okay guys, and who has answered it the fastest? Richa Nigam, Yuva Bhaskar and Rohit Sinha. Congrats all of you. I am so proud of you guys. And guys, remember, all of you, all the bachas get equal opportunity of of having your name here on the screen, and you know how to do it. You just have to very quickly like and subscribe the video and the channel, and go into the comment box, not in the live chat, and put your answers over there. Ma'am will be eagerly waiting for your answers, and I love to have all of your names over here, and I hope one by one everybody gets an opportunity to do that, right? Okay, come on, let's get quickly started with the session and have a look at what we're going to have today. So the agenda, the index for today is, so we're going to talk about a new conservatism, okay, a new group. We'll see what this group was about, why was it there, what did they do. Then we're going to talk about the revolutionaries, the age of revolutions, the romantic imagination and national feeling, hunger, hardships and popular revolt, and the revolution of the liberals. So we're going to understand who all these people were, what they wanted and how did it start, followed by the very important part where you get to see the 1 mark important question which you have in form of homework, right? Okay. So as you remember, so what did we read about last in the previous session? So if you remember, we discussed about how the revolution started, how the monarchy was thrown away, but then how it was brought back, how different people in different segments were struggling, how feudalism was resolved, removed, abolished, and all of that. Now, while all of this was going on, something new started, okay, which was kind of marking the rise of nationalism. Actually, it was in a process of that, which is the conservatism, right? There were people called conservatives. Now, who were these people? So, I'll go a little back in the time and I'll tell you what, if you remember, after Louis XVI was executed after the French Revolution, France had established as a republic. Now over here, the Republic state of France was again destroyed. By whom? By Napoleon. And you're exactly right, it was Napoleon, right? And after Napoleon had destroyed it, it had different kinds of effects. First, people were very fond of him, as we read in the last session, but then we realized that they started kind of processing and assessing that the kind of, because ultimately he was a monarch, the kind of behavior or oppression that he was having over the people was not as good as celebrating his new administrative code or the kind of changes that he was bringing in. So as a result of that, there were a lot of people who were liking him, and there were also a lot of people who were not liking him. Now there was this another set of group of people who were really not liking him. Now why were they not liking him? Because they were very kind of threatened by him. They were afraid by him, by his ambitious nature. He was so ambitious, he had so big, he wanted to achieve such big goals that these guys were kind of jealous and threatened by him. And who were these people? They were the conservatives. Now, what do we mean by conservative? So this is not the first time that we're hearing about conservatives, guys, right? If you kind of go back in time and recall from your previous year's syllabus, we have read about them. Okay, you have heard this name. Where have you heard this name? While talking about socialism in Europe, right? Who were these people? These people were basically in general, what do you understand by conservatives? They are people who are not very open to changes. They're not very open to development. They're very traditional, conventional people. Similarly, in here, they were very traditional, conventional people who used to value the church, the monarchy, the family values a lot. They were not really open to changes. Now, however, they were not asking people to go back to the time before the revolution. They were accepting a lot of changes that were brought in, but they were not really a fan of Napoleon. They were very jealous, threatened, afraid of him, and wanted him to be thrown away. Now, they wanted to kind of keep the changes that was brought by Napoleon intact, but they wanted him gone. They were really kind of appreciating the modern army, the efficient bureaucracy, the dynamic economy, everything, okay? But, and again, the abolition of feudalism, the serfdom, everything that could strengthen the autocratic monarchy, but they wanted Napoleon gone. As a result of which, all of them got together, all the conservatives from different parts of Europe, and they ultimately went against Napoleon and defeated him in the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. Okay, so Napoleon was defeated by the conservatives in the Battle of 1815. Now, after this, what happens? So, obviously, now that Napoleon is gone, someone must take up France. So, who does that? It was done by the conservatives. Now, these conservatives came from where? So, these were people from Russia, Prussia, Britain, and Australia. And if you want to remember it in short, you can remember it as BARP, B-A-R-P, BARP. Okay. So, these were basically the ambassadors of these European states. Now, after they defeated Napoleon, it was time for celebration. They had achieved what they have been longing for. So they gathered together to to celebrate their achievement, to celebrate their success against Napoleon. Now, what was this celebration called, and what was the purpose of the celebration, and what all things did they decide over here? So this celebration was actually hosted by the Australian Chancellor called Duke Metternich. Now, this guy is very interesting, okay. This is not the first time that we are here reading about him. I mean, like, this is not the only time. We will get to know about something about him further also. He says something very interesting and funny about France. But as of now, he's this Austrian Chancellor who hosts this party, who hosts this celebration, and this is what they're calling as Treaty of Vienna 1815. Okay, now over here, as I told you, there was a purpose of this meeting. So the purpose of this meeting was to discuss the changes that they wanted to bring in. What changes? So now that overthrown Napoleon, they wanted to replace everything that was brought by him. They wanted to undo all of the changes that was brought by Napoleon. Now, what kind of changes? So Napoleon had destroyed the Bourbon dynasty. Okay, so they wanted to restore it back, which was undone by Napoleon. Okay, at the same time, France was losing its territories. Now, what do I mean by this? So what these people did was they kind of redivided France among themselves. Okay, the territories were redivided, redistributed. So that's how France kind of lost its territories. Now, if you remember, guys, we were discussing how taxes were being abolished, because with every state as you would pass, there would be different taxes. There were around 30 currencies, and all of this was trying to be kind of changed, right? And a German confederation of 39 states was formed by Napoleon. Now, this was the only thing that these guys left untouched, that they retained. Apart from this, everything that was brought in by Napoleon, they kind of changed that. Okay, they even tried to impose a forced, you can say, curbing over France. They were trying to form states around it. They were trying to set boundaries around it so that they do not expand. Now, why are they trying so hard to do all of this, to change whatever Napoleon has had? They're trying to, curb the expansion of France. Why all of this? All of this because these guys were afraid of Napoleon, definitely, and they were afraid of French people. They were afraid that the kind of potential that these people carried, which was witnessed through the French Revolution, they were afraid of such an upheaval that could have happened and that they would have failed to address. So they were trying to take all those measures that they could do to curb it. In order to achieve this, what these guys did was they were continuously, you can say, propagating, they were continuously promoting autocratic attitude. Now what do we mean by autocratic? Autocratic means absolute rule. Okay, whatever it is, whoever it is, it's all me, all power has to be with me. As a result of which they would tolerate no criticism, no tolerance towards criticism, no tolerance towards dissent. Okay, and how were they doing this? So if you remember, we have discussed censorship before, right? So through censorship they were trying to suppress the newspapers, songs, plays, anything, any kind of expression, okay, which was coming from the people, which would show some sort of dissatisfaction, which would criticize them in any manner, which would question them in any manner. All of that was being curbed down, all of that was being suppressed, okay, or anything that would question their existence, their legitimacy, everything was being shut down by force. As a result of this, now whenever you're trying to force and suppress something, something gets triggered and comes up. The same thing happened, okay, as a result of all of the suppression. And French people are already very rebellious, very revolutionary by nature, okay, that was something that was in their blood. Now when the suppression happened, there were a group of people who were like, they cannot take this anymore, and they got an agenda to fight for the freedom of the press. Now, who were these people? Now, it was not just a fight for the freedom of the press, it was just one of the fights. Now, who were these people? So these people were basically the nationalists, the people who had got inspired from the French Revolution, maybe veterans of that, maybe people who were a part of that revolution. All of these nationalists, the liberals, okay, who wanted liberalization, who wanted freedom to come in, they came together, okay, and these French nationalists came to fight. And this is how the revolution started again. Now, who were these revolutionaries and what did they want? Okay, now one thing that was clear was, as we discussed, that these people were being constantly suppressed. Any kind of expression, protest was being oppressed by the autocratic rule that these conservatives had adopted. So the people, the revolutionaries, okay, all these nationalists and liberals realized that they cannot do this out in the open. So they decided to go underground, okay, they kind of hid from the people around who were being vigilant about such activities. They hid, they went underground, they did not do it out in the open in the broad daylight. They went in hiding, and they came up with something called secret societies. Why? Because they were in hiding, and in hiding they were forming these societies to fight against this injustice, which was known as secret societies. Okay, it was to fight against it was obviously because they had realized that they couldn't plan in the open against these conservatives because of their oppression and suppression. So they came up with these secret societies, which had majorly three objectives. Okay, what were these three objectives? The very first one was obviously to fight this autocratic rule, okay, this autocratic regime that the conservatives were practicing. This absolute rule was something they were absolutely against of. Then second thing that they demanded was liberalization, liberty and freedom, very important, and obviously opposing the monarchical society, okay, opposing the monarchical society. This monarchy setup had to be had to be opposed. These were three major objectives that these people had. Now, whenever there are revolutionaries, there's always somebody who kinds of takes away, you know, the level to something else, from 1 to 10 all of a sudden. And similarly, we had another revolutionary over here called Giuseppe Mazzini. Mazzini was born in Genoa in 1807. Now he was on another level. I mean, what kind of a revolutionary? In the age of like maybe some, he was very young actually when he became a part of these revolutions, when he became a part of all of these movements and societies, and he became a part of one of these societies called Carbonari right in his teenage, for which as a young man, or just of 24 years old, he was even imprisoned, he was even put into exile in 1831 for attempting a revolution in Liguria. Okay, he was actually out there being a part of this revolution, and he even got imprisoned for it. Okay, now this man was something else, and in a very less amount of time he revolutionized a lot of things, and he even came up with two secret societies of his own: Young Italy and Young Europe. So Young Italy was formed in Marseilles, and Young Europe came up in you could say in Bonn. Okay, and the whole idea, the whole objective that he had was to oppose monarchy, to not tolerate whatever was going on. Okay, so what was his belief system? And this is very interesting, guys. Okay, now he believed in unification of Italy. Okay, he was from Italy, and he believed in unification of this you could say the parts, the segments, that fragments that it was divided in. He wanted to unify that, and not just like that, on the basis of liberty. He wanted freedom, he wanted liberty. But why did he want this? He wanted this because he believed that it was actually not him or the people whose this kind of agenda was. He actually felt that it was God's will. It was something that God wanted, and God had created nations to be the natural units of mankind, to be together, not to be fragmented and distributed and divided. So thus he wanted unification of the whole nation, and he also wanted to achieve nation state. If you remember, we have discussed modern state, nation state, modern nation state in the previous session. If you have missed that, quickly go back, watch the previous session, and come back here so that you get to understand the basics of it. Okay, so he was continuously professing this, that it's God's will that we all are together, and he wanted to unify Italy. And as a result of this, now whenever there's some revolutionary of this motivation, of this kind, people always get influenced and inspired of him. Similarly, a lot of people got inspired of Mazzini, started following him, as a result of which created many secret societies that were set up in different parts of Europe, in Germany, in France, in Switzerland, and in Poland. And this started, as a result of this, started the age of revolution in Europe, because everywhere revolutionaries were coming up. They were setting up these secret societies, they were setting up these groups to fight. And this age of revolution from 1830 to 1848 is what we are going to read now. Now, why were these, as I told you, a lot of revolutions were going around. Why was this revolution happening? It was happening because of conflict of interest, conflict of desire. And who were these two parties who were having this conflict, this disagreement? It were the nationalists or the liberals, and the conservatives, the people who wanted freedom, people who wanted change, people who wanted democracy, republic. And then there were people who were conservatives, who wanted to have absolute rule, who wanted to have autocratic rule, right? So it was between these two groups that the fight was going on, as a result of which the whole age of you could say revolution started. Now, what do we mean by this age of revolution? It means like it was a whole new era that people were entering, right? It was a whole new time span, right? And everywhere people were fighting for their rights. People were going ahead with revolution protests, openly waging against whatever injustice they felt existed, right? And as I told you, it was majorly between these two groups. Now, who led the revolution and what revolutions happened? Now, earlier, if you see, guys, if you might have noticed that the lower class, right, the peasants, the farmers, these exploited slave class has always been a part of the revolution. But there was a slight change over here, right? If you remember, industrialization has brought a new setup in the society, which brought an existence of the middle class. So it was this new middle class which was now educated, which was more aware, which was also financially somewhat stable compared to the peasants, to the serfs, all of these people, and these people were now fighting for it. So they had more strong grounds, they were more aware, they were more educated, and this led to three major revolutions that we are going to discuss about. Okay, now what were these three major revolutions? The very first one, of course, whenever we talk about revolution, France has to come into the picture. So the very first upheaval that we're going to talk about was in France, which was in July 1830. Now what happened over here? So as I told you, if you remember, after the French Revolution, King Louis was executed and the Republic state was established, but which was destroyed by Napoleon. Now Napoleon was overthrown and came in power the conservatives. And what they did was they made Louis Philippe the new monarch, the new head. Now this is what they had been fighting against. Okay, now this is what was going on in France. Now whenever something happens in France, it kind of always propagated, it kind of always spread around in the entire Europe, and the same thing happened with Belgium. Revolution of Brussels. What happened over here was Belgium saw France got inspired and was like, okay, enough. I am not going to settle for this. I am going to, what they demanded was to be separated from the United Kingdom of Netherlands. They were like, we want freedom, we want to get away from you. Now guys, how did they get inspired from France? Coming back here quickly. So if you remember, there was Bourbon dynasty which was destroyed. Okay, it was again put back, and now when Louis Philippe came, he was not just a normal monarch, he was definitely a constitutional monarch. Okay, a constitutional monarchy was being set up. However, people wanted everything to be changed, and a big revolution was going around, which inspired, as I told you, Brussels as well. But the most important fight that was happening was in Greece. Okay, the Greek war of independence. I somehow tend to say world war, I don't know why every time. Okay, so the Greek war of independence. Now Greece is a beautiful place. Even now it's so appreciated for its art, for its culture, and obviously it wouldn't have happened in a day. It is something that has existed from long back. It was a place where there were artists, there were poets, there were so many other people who loved the art, who loved the culture, who appreciated it. Now what happened, Greece was actually a part of the Ottoman Empire in the 15th century, and since then that's where they had been. And now this time when France woke up, when Belgium woke up, Greek was like, okay bro, I am done with this, I need to get away, I need to be independent. Okay, and this was a place, as I told you, was appreciated by everybody. Okay, it was loved by everybody, the poets and everyone. It was so renowned around for its art and culture that when they actually demanded for this, everyone around, okay, kind of came into its support. Nobody backed off. The citizens who were in exile, the poets, the artists, every possible person around came and supported Greece for its Greek, for its sorry, I kept on saying that, for its you could say fight in freedom, and that finally they won. And you know, because of the popularity that it had, it is also known as cradle of European civilization. But then because of this, all of the support, they finally achieved what they wanted, and with the treaty, with an official document of Constantinople in 1832, they decided, it was recognized that Greece is an independent nation, and they got freedom from Ottoman Empire. Okay, so after this, you remember I was telling you in the beginning that this is the same Duke, okay, he's the same Austrian Chancellor who had hosted this Treaty of Vienna. Now what he said, he had something very interesting to say. We have seen that France has always been a great influencer, it has been a great inspiration, and the same thing was happening every time with all the revolutions that was going on. That's why conservatives were even very afraid of it, right? So what Metternich said was, whenever France sneezes, the entire Europe catches cold. Which means whenever France is like that one center, it's like that, you can say right now, are a vector of coronavirus. This one person who gets coronavirus, it's like it's like China, which spreads everything around. Okay, the entire Europe gets infected, which means no matter what France has, it will influence, it will spread it out in the entire Europe, and that is what was happening, right? Okay, so now we're going to talk about a new kind of nationalistic emotion that was coming into people. Okay, now we're going to talk about the romantic imagination and the national feeling. Now, what do you mean by romantic imagination, guys? Now, it's not the typical love and romance imagination that we are referring to. This was romanticism, was actually a new cultural movement. Okay, it was a new cultural movement that was developing a new kind of form of nationalist sentiment among people. Now, earlier people would gather together to express their nationalist sentiment or emotion through multiple ways, protest, violence, and all of that. But now people were moving away from that, and that's why France, Europe is so beautiful and so rich in art and culture, because these kind of movements were coming up, and now people were expressing their nationalist feeling, their emotions, their desire for a nation state with poems, with arts, with plays, with poetries, all of this art and culture and all of that things were coming into existence. I personally am a fan of that. Okay, so what happened now? Who were these people? They shared a collective heritage, they had a common culture and mystical feelings. Okay, and these people just not you could say promoted art and culture, and this way were trying to show their patriotism, but they were also criticizing science and logic and reasoning, because they felt that that was somewhere killing the emotions among people, and people were trying to we were kind of turning inhuman, which is not the natural self of humans. So through these, they started to, you can say, started a new movement to sort a particular form of national sentiment. Now under this we had a huge way, see, as I told you, like how we had Mazzini, similarly we had new people who were romantics. Okay, now one of this was and guys, these romantics always promoted culture, language, art, everything, and out of this came two very important people that we are going to read about. Okay, one who promoted culture to a great extent, and the other promoted the language, which we will talk about ahead. Okay, now the person who promoted culture in a great manner was Johann Gottfried Herder. Okay, now he would say that culture is something that has a huge power to, you can say, protest against people who are trying to destroy it, who's trying to suppress it. And he talked about two new things, he coined two new terms. One was Das Walk and the other was Volksgeist. Now what does this mean? Volksgeist, by Volksgeist, he basically means that the spirit of any nation lies in its culture. The beauty, the spirit, the energy, the legacy of any culture, any nation is all in its culture. And such is the power of culture that it holds. And that's why it should always be maintained. And the second was Das Walk, according to which he said that the true culture of any nation, so culture, he said, one, you know that the true spirit of any nation lies in the culture. And where does this culture lie? So this is the answer in his Das Walk, which according to him meant that the true culture of people, if you really want to understand it, you should come and stay with the common people, because that's where it lies. You will not find it with the royals, the kings, the queens, their family, the scholars, the nobles, nobody but the common people. Okay, and then there was the second person. So guys, this was the case. So we are talking about two cases. One was in Germany, which was this, and the second case was of Poland. So in Poland, what happened was, it was basically about language. There was this person called Karol Karpinski. Karol Karpinski basically said that language, okay, language is a great weapon. You do not need to protest, you do not need arms and ammunitions. What you need is language, your heritage, which is something that connects all of us. Now, why did he say that? So at this moment, okay, the Poland, the region in 18th century was partitioned between the powers of Russia, Prussia and Austria. The people were being divided. Okay, they had to get themselves partitioned, as you can say, and they didn't want that because these powers were great in existence. They had forced it on them, as a result of which they were now in different fragments. However, they were still connected with something, which was their language. And Karol Krupinski recognized that. He took that, he said that the best way of offering resistance to such power, to such oppression, is being associated, being connected with language. And that's what he picked, which united, which unified all of them. And what he did was, he would, you can say, promote it through different kinds of art and culture. He would celebrate, because he was a romantic artist, right? He would do it through operas, through music, through dance, everywhere he could, where he could promote the language. He even, as a result of this, even a lot of priests and bishops had started, you can say, having their gatherings, the religious gatherings, in their Polish language, okay, as a result of which they were put in jail. A lot of oppression they had to face. They were even executed, not just them, a lot of other people. Struggle for Polish language over Russian language in Poland is what Karol was completely pushing up. He was like, no matter what, we are not going to accept Russian language, because this is what we have Polish. And ultimately, this couldn't last for a very long period of time, because the Russian army was really strong, and they were successfully able to suppress this, but they were never able to kill the spirit of the people. Okay, now while all of this was going on, something else was also constantly, parallelly, simultaneously happening, which was the hunger, hardships, and the popular revolt together. Now people were already in a lot of hardship. It's not like their life is easy or something, okay, in Europe, entire Europe. But at the same time, something struck which was making it even more difficult, which was an economical crisis. Now in 1830s, Europe was struck with economic hardships. And guys, this was in a loop, okay. It started with one thing leading to the another, and it would go on in a circle. The final stage would again lead to the first stage, and let's understand this over here. So this economic hardship started. Now why did it start? It was starting because the population was now increasing. Now whenever population increases, naturally the resources would be less, the jobs would be less, and as a result of this, the economic depression will be there. Now because the jobs were less, the unemployment was increasing among people, because the demands of jobs were increasing, but it was not enough for them to be supplied. There were not enough opportunities for them to have. So only the job seekers were increasing, but the employment was not, as a result of which people from the rural area were now migrating to cities. This is what normally happens when people do not have life, money, or jobs in villages. They start getting attracted towards the cities, and they start moving to the cities. So now the entire population was migrating to the cities, which was further leading to the increase in the slum areas, in the people who were going to live in slum areas, because they already had no money. They had to somehow adjust, so they were taking up any sort of job that was available for them, increasing the population of the lower class. Now, if you remember, feudalism was not completely gone. The peasants were already suffering over here against the aristocrats. Okay, they were already pretty much in power. Now, there were more people flooding in and adding into that. So, it was further creating this huge imbalance where the poverty among the people was increasing more and more. As a result of which, there was a spike up. There was a rise in the food prices, and the foods were falling short. Why? Because see, naturally, if there's something short in the market, the prices will spike up. Whenever onion is less in the market, the prices spike up, right? Similarly, the foods were short. Why were the foods short? Because the population was increasing. The population was moving from village to city, and as a result of all of this, food prices went up, and then it went back again to the point where economic depression was happening. Now, with all of this, this is another struggle that people were having. The same thing was happening in France. Now, France has always been the center of such places, of such events. Now, what happened in Paris, as a result of this economic depression, of this hardship, people came onto the streets and they started revolting. Now, this scared Louis Philippe. Why? because he remembered French Revolution and what had happened to King Louis the 16th, and he was aware that the same threat, the same sword was hanging on his head, because people were volatile, they were being like diabolic at that time, they were going crazy, they were angry, they were protesting, and he didn't want to take the risk of maybe executed and end up like the previous king during the French Revolution. So he fled away, he ran away from there in 1848. Now if he ran away, there was no power, there was no government to take care of the France, of the country, of the nation. So who came to the rescue? National Assembly. They have always been the hero, right? So they immediately filled up in the place and they came into rescue for the nation, and which made France back a republic. It became a republic again, where the suffrage where the voting rights, where the suffrage was given to all adult males above 21. Now something that we need to notice over here, it says all adult males, women were still fighting for it. Okay, not just that, because there were a lot of hardships being faced by people because of unemployment, because of increasing population and everything. They also gave right to work to people. Now how did they achieve this, guys? So what they started doing was they started organizing workshops, right? They started organizing, you can say, certain events where people could go, people could assess and have and explore the opportunities of that they had at different working options. So that's how they were now trying to resolve the problem. They were like, okay, fine, you do not have a government, let's fix that. You don't want a monarch, let's fix that. You have unemployment, let's fix that. So one by one, all the hardships that France had was being taken care of by National Assembly. But that was there in France. There were other problems happening in different parts of Europe, like for example in Silesia in Italy. The weavers over here, so there were more than 18,000 cotton weavers in this place. Okay, you can imagine the amount of production that must be happening. Now economic depression is going on, so there were certain contractors who came there and they were like, we are giving you a lot of raw materials, use it, we are placing a lot of orders, use it and do the production, and we will buy it all of from you at the right prices. Now there was already unemployment, there was already economic depression. They took these orders and they produced everything. Now while they were towards the end of it, the contractors denied. Okay, they first reduced the order, what they had placed, they reduced that, and also they did not pay them enough. They were paying them very low wages, as a result of which the cotton weavers got really upset, and they did what? They started revolting. France has always been there to inspire people, right? So because their demands were not you can say considered, they went out revolting. They were like very angry. They broke into the contractors' houses. They kind of looted everything they could, because they had no money. They were poor, miserable people who had no other option, and no one was really understanding their misery. Now they were trying to get whatever they could in order to, which was only to justify what injustice was done to them. As a result of these contractors were trying to get refuge from people around wherever they could, but they were not helped out by those people, because they were aware from the nearby places, villages, cities, that what injustice they had done to the cotton weavers. Now as a final resort, they turned towards the army. Now army obviously used their suppression, used their power, brutality, and suppressed the power, suppressed the revolt, as a result of which 11 weavers were even shot dead. Now guys, though the revolt was suppressed, but it did not, just like before, kill the spirits of the people. Okay, so that is what happened over here. Now the final thing what we are going to understand is, while all of this was going on, this was going on with the peasants, with the farmers, with the weavers, right, the lower class. But at the same time, something else also came up, which was the middle class, the educated class, which was somewhat more stable financially. Why? So already this wave of revolution was going on. Now they realized that this was the right time to hit on the nail. It was the right time because everything is so disturbed. They might as well get their you can say wishes, their conditions fulfilled as well. And who were these people? As I told you, they were the educated middle class people. Now what were their conditions? Just like every time, they wanted kind of democracy and republic to be set up. They wanted monarchy to be abolished, and they wanted universal male suffrage to again be achieved. And who were these people who were asking for this? So they were the middle class, they were the nationalists, they were the liberals from this country of Germany, Italy, Poland, the Austro-Hungarian people. Okay, now what did they decide? So as I told you, they wanted a nation state. Okay, they wanted the parliamentary principles to be implemented. They wanted a constitution. They wanted a freedom. They wanted the freedom to press. They were also fighting before for freedom of press, which the conservatives were trying to curb, to censor, right? And they wanted freedom of association. They wanted universal suffrage for male. So all of this, they decided. What did they decide to do? They decided they will come up together and take this request or demand to the monarch, to the king. But before this, what they did? So in Germany, the middle class people, they came together and they voted all by themselves. Okay. And just like France, like how France had National Assembly, this time they formed German National Assembly in Germany. They drafted a constitution by themselves. Okay, and these people who came together to vote, they selected some 831 representatives who marched to the Frankfurt Parliament. Now this Frankfurt Parliament was not yet ready. There was no particular parliament how we have here right now, because it was not a constitutional monarchy, or it was not a democracy. It was not a place where parliament was there. So this was actually convened in a church called St. Paul Church. Now over there, they actually put this offer, whatever their demands were, in front of the king, which was for a constitutional monarchy. What do you think the king would have said? Do you think he would have agreed? Like, okay, fine, you guys have come, let's listen to your demands? Obviously not. They refused. They were like, no, no matter what you demand. Friedrich Wilhelm IV, the king of Prussia at that time, outrightly rejected the proposal. Now guys, there might be a slight window of confusion. Just here we said case of Germany, and now we are saying Prussia. Why is this? So at that time, the boundaries were not very clearly separated. When we say German, we are more referring to the current status of the boundaries. And also at that time, these were basically the population who used to speak German. And that's why we are saying Germany. The boundaries were not clearly divided. Okay, that's why we are also taking this area where the king of Prussia was there, who rejected and who did not accept this offer of having a clear constitutional monarchy. And he did not just rejected it, he also got the other monarchs to join him, to kind of form an army to suppress this. Okay, as a result of which they lost the middle class support and they lost the revolt. Okay, and they purposely suppressed it. They called the troops, and the assembly was forced to disband. Okay, people were forced to disband. Now along of all of this, if you remember, every time people were only asking for the male rights to vote. What was happening to the women in the society? So even when this meeting was held, okay, when the representatives went, we saw that the women were there only as spectators. They were not really there as participants. They were not so actively participative. They were kind of sidelined. So what were their participation? So on their own end, what they tried to do was they tried to create their own political associations. They founded their own newspapers, they would have their own demonstrations, but they were not really accepted as equal members in the society and were denied the suffrage. Okay. Now, while all of this revolt was going on, and we saw a lot of revolts were also suppressed, but does that mean that there was no result of this? No, of course, they did achieve something. There was certain outcome which was achieved out of all of this revolution. What happened was the conservatives realized that France has such potential and such influence and is so inspirational that people are not going to set back. They realize that they're not going to be suppressed anymore and that the society is not going to go back to the old order. Although they do not exactly let the liberals win, they suppressed it successfully, but they also realized that they cannot put them back exactly in the old order how it was before the revolutions. So in order to avoid any other revolution in the future, they came up with certain, you can say, compensations. Okay, it was kind of a compensation reward or award for the people in order to keep them contained and not be a part of a new revolution which would have shaken the conservatives. Okay, so what they decided was to completely abolish the serfdom, the feudal, under the feudalism system, the people who were there, and the bonded labor system in Habsburg dominions and in Russia. They agreed to that. Also, with the Habsburg rulers, they granted more autonomy to the Hungarians in 1867. Okay guys, so with this we are done with today's session, which I feel was very interesting to know how different kinds of revolutions was going around. How did the era of revolution in Europe look like? How did this new sense of nationalism, new depiction of nationalism was being done through romantic feelings and different ways. Next we will see and talk about unification of Germany and all of other things. Before that, let's have a quick look at this question, which is very important. Which of the following countries did not attend the Congress of Vienna? Britain, Portugal, Russia, or Prussia? And if you like the video, if this helped you, please do not forget to hit the like button, to subscribe the channel, because we are not done yet. There's a lot more that will be coming up with, and I will see you soon in the next session. Till then, stay home, stay safe, take care of yourself, take care of your loved ones, guys, and have a great day. Be motivated, be super energetic. I will see you very soon. Take care, guys. Bye bye.